Yep.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's 12:03 on April 7th, 2025, and we are here for the Muckboots in the Capitol weekly state legislative update with Friends of Family Farmers. As always, my name is Alice Morrison. I'm the co-executive director of policy and development here at Friends of Family Farmers and head of our advocacy program, and I will be updating you this week on what's happening in Salem related to small farms. So, as always, we are going to go through our agenda. We have updates on FOP's priorities. We have quite a bit to say in that section this time. Then hearings that happened last week, what resulted, and then hearings that are happening this week that we're looking forward to. And then we're going to talk again about looking ahead and the upcoming deadlines and where we are in the legislative session. So, FOP priority updates. Of course, we will start off with our state meat inspection bill that would be getting staff dollars from general fund to ODA to employ inspectors for the state meat inspection program. This bill, we've enjoyed some wonderful success early in the session. It passed unanimously out of the House Ag Committee back in March and is now moving, might have been in February actually, it was very early, is now in Ways and Means, and we will continue to advocate for the inclusion of that in the budget reconciliation or the agency budget, wherever folks think it needs to fit in. So yes, no updates, still in Ways and Means. There are Ways and Means roadshow dates available if you live in any of these communities. The next one is in LeGrand on the 11th, and then Salem, the statewide virtual testimony option is on the 16th, and then they'll be in Klamath Falls on the 25th. And if you're interested in attending one of those Ways and Means roadshows and mentioning this bill, we would be eternally grateful and would love to help you in that process. So reach out to us after this call. Okay, so the main event today, we are going to be talking about our small farm water access domestic well commercial garden bill. It is HB 3372. And we finally have bill text to tell you about. Thank goodness, because our hearing was also this morning, which we're going to talk about in a moment. But I know we've been talking about this bill for quite a while, and the amendment, the -5 amendment, is the big. So the text that's there in for HB 3372 is placeholder text, and the -5 amendment that is now on OLIS and publicly available is the bill. So we are supportive of the -5 amendment as drafted. I want to preface with that. The components are that we're trying to fit some ability to grow food commercially into the current exemptions. We are not adding a new exemption. I know that some of the previous iterations of the bill and some of the previously discussed pathways involved an additional exemption. That's not what we're doing here. We're working within current exemptions. And so the two things that we're working on, the two exemptions that we are noodling around in, are the half acre. Currently, the law says a half acre personal garden, and you can have up to 5,000 gallons per day for commercial, a single commercial or industrial use. So what this bill, the -5 amendment, would allow that half acre to be used in part or whole for commercial gardening. So you still only get a half acre and you can use as much of that as you want for a commercial garden if you so choose. And it imposes an irrigation gallon limit for the first time on that half acre. Before, when it was a personal garden, well, currently, I should say, the current law is that that personal garden has no gallon limit whatsoever. This bill would say that you could use 3,000 gallons per day for that half acre garden, whether it is commercial or personal. Also, it says that the irrigation or the half acre plus the currently allowed commercial exemption cannot exceed a total of 5,000 gallons. So essentially, this means that if you were doing the maximum amount of commercial gardening under this exemption, under our proposal, you would be allowed to irrigate a half acre with no more than 3,000 gallons per day and use that additional 2,000 gallons of the commercial exemption for things like post-harvest handling or value-added products or other farm water uses. So you're still allowed to irrigate a half acre. You're still allowed to use 5,000 gallons per day for a commercial purpose, and 3,000 of that 5,000 gallons can be for commercial irrigation. Cannabis is excluded from this proposal. So it is the only thing that is not allowed to be included as a commercial product in the proposal, and all other types of growing are permitted. So this is not just limited to food. You can grow any other food or farm product except cannabis with this exemption. That was a request of the sponsor because there are concerns, especially in Southern Oregon, that there is already a pretty deep history of illegal water use in gray market, in black market cannabis industries, and that we did not want to create more pathways for that. That was a priority for the sponsor. So that's the proposal, the Dash 5 amendment. We are supportive of the Dash 5 amendment as written. We're not requesting any changes at this time. And the hearing happened this morning. So at 8 a.m., our group walked into the hearing room and we waited patiently through a bunch of work sessions and were able to testify on this bill starting at about 9:20 a.m. So if you are looking back at the recordings of the committee meeting, just go to about an hour and 20 minutes into the recording and you'll start seeing the hearing for this bill. Thank you to everyone who testified. Thank you to Water League, the Oregon Farmers Market Association, Plug of Oregon, Oregon State Grange, even though they didn't get to your testimony. Thank you for being part of the panel. Jason from Harney County and the Harney County Soil and Water Conservation District, Jenny Jonick from Dragon Song Farm, Lakshmi Stories, and Rihanna Sims from Verdant Phoenix Farm. Thank you so much for testifying. You can submit written testimony in support of this bill up until 8 a.m. on Wednesday. You have 48 hours and 48 hours from the start of the hearing time to submit your written testimony. So if you've been waiting to see the amendment language, totally understand. We would love for you to submit your testimony by 8 a.m. on Wednesday the 9th, because after that, the portal will no longer be open. We have over 220 pieces of supportive testimony on the record right now. Thank you so much. This building a really, really strong written record is really crucial here to demonstrate that we have a lot of community support for this and that this is a priority for not just people who want to use the water to grow food, but those who are interested in having this be part of their community and support this type of community-based agriculture. The work session is scheduled for Wednesday, the 9th, and that is where the committee is going to vote on the outcome of this bill and whether or not it will move forward. There are some possible outcomes here. So Wednesday the 9th is also the first chamber deadline. So that means that if this bill is not moved by the end of the day on the 9th, it could die. So potentially the bill will die if no vote occurs, or if it's defeated in a vote. It could be referred to the Rules Committee to because the Rules Committee is not beholden to the same timelines as the other policy committees. And so they could refer it to Rules for further discussion and debate and possible future amendments, or it could be voted out of the committee and sent to the floor for a vote, and then referred to either Ways and Means if a fiscal is attached to it. We're hoping that there wouldn't be, but there is a possibility that it could, or referred to a Senate Policy Committee. I don't want to speculate about which committee that would be. Usually agriculture issues go to the Senate Natural Resources Committee, but they could choose to send it any old place. So those are the possible outcomes for the vote on Wednesday morning, and we will know the fate of the bill by 9:55 on Wednesday morning. All right, so you can check out testimony templates and instructions on our website, and we would highly encourage you to make your voice heard here. You can always find them at friendsandfamilyfarmers.org/small-farm-water-. That is our campaign page for this whole process and will be updated with all the latest information. And it has the link to our testimony template and context there as well. So you know exactly where to submit your testimony and what that means and all of those things. Okay, so we had a hearing last week for another bill that we're working on. So SB 80, it was a priority of the Stand Up to Factory Farms Coalition, of which we are a part, and it would not allow any large or expanding large CAFOs in groundwater management areas. So groundwater management areas are sensitive groundwater areas that are already facing steep recovery from groundwater contamination. And in particular, we have a couple of areas in the state that are heavily contaminated with nitrates, which are associated with scale inappropriate animal agriculture. And it's very well documented that that connection exists. And in SB 85, which we helped pass in 2023, they could still get a permit in these sensitive areas if they had an individual permit and were not relying on the general NPDES federal clean water permit that the state has and administers. So they would have to have, like, there are additional administrative hoops to jump through, but they still could get a permit in these sensitive areas. And we're talking about the largest of the large here. More than 700 dairy cows, more than 30,000 chickens at a given time, not in the entire year, but like at a snapshot, more than 10,000 sheep and lambs, all of that kind of thing, that the largest tier that we are talking about. So we are in favor of this bill. We had a hearing last week where lots of people from the lower Umatilla Basin groundwater management area out in Morrow and Umatilla counties came out to have their voices heard. And we had a very robust hearing, lots of testimony on both sides. And at the end of the hearing, unfortunately, the chair of the Senate Natural Resources Committee, where this bill was heard, made the statement that this bill would not be moving forward. They are not going to be scheduling it for a vote. They have decided that they are not moving this bill forward. That was very frustrating for everyone involved, especially those who traveled 8 hours to be at that hearing, and those who are facing like many times over dangerous levels of groundwater contamination that is directly linked to scale inappropriate agriculture and are not being. So the feeling of the hearing was that there were promises made that the LWAMA needs to be dealt with, that clean water needs to be a priority, and that changes need to be made, but they were not willing to move this bill forward as a change to be made to address the situation. We are disappointed in that. Obviously, we were a supporter of this bill, but I have a bill on the list for this week that I will also touch on that could help to get at some of the same issues and prioritize clean water for Oregonians. So hearings this week, in addition to ours, which we are, we're waiting for the work session with bated breath, but bills that we're following that we've heard from us before, the Food for All Oregonians bill, that bill is going to have a work session tomorrow to determine whether or not it will move forward. Also, that bill has had a further amendment and has been narrowed in scope to children 6 and under. So it was before, in 2023, that bill was for all folks to create a state program to expand SNAP eligibility to those who would qualify, except for their immigration status. And then this year, when they decided to run the bill in order to keep the fiscal low and to keep the scope narrow for the beginning of this program, they first introduced the bill as pertaining to youth, so age 25 and lower, and then seniors, so 65 plus. But now they have narrowed that bill again to make it more viable in the budget landscape that we have here. So just the youngest children who are really vulnerable to food insecurity. So children 6 and under. And that bill has a work session tomorrow. And then there will also be the governor's groundwater management bill, which we thought was going to have a hearing last week, same day as SB 80, is actually being heard tomorrow in the Senate Natural Resources Committee at 1 o'clock. And that is a proposal that the governor's office has put together that is a more robust package of ways to address groundwater management areas across the state, including identification and remediation of many sources of pollution, both industrial and agricultural and everything in between. So we will be following that very closely. And those are the hearings that are happening this week, in addition to our work session, which is tomorrow, or Wednesday, sorry, not tomorrow, Wednesday, April 9th. So looking ahead, April 9th, that is the first chamber deadline. So anything that is not in rules or revenue committees and has not passed out of its first legislative chamber will be considered dead at that. So that means that this is the first time where the scope of the session is going to be narrowed. And that means that it's going to get more serious from here on out. Like these are the bills that are actually being considered, all the bills that, were maybe a marker bill, just wanting to start a conversation, bringing up an issue, or that didn't have enough support to get out of their first chamber committee will no longer be on the table. And so after the end of the day on April 9th, we are going to go through with our legislative consultants and all of those things to look at, what made it across the finish line, what didn't, how we're moving forward and redraw kind of what we're going to be focusing on for the rest of the session based on what's still alive. And of course, we are going to continue our priority areas and then this is also a time where if something doesn't make it across that line to viability in the second half of the session, then we think about, okay, what are alternatives for that campaign? How can we move the conversation forward and make change in that way outside of this particular opportunity? And how can we keep that momentum going so that we can continue to serve our community on that issue outside of the legislative system if necessary? So we'll have more to say next week in our update about what's still around, what's not moving forward, and how we're going to prioritize our time for the rest of the session. So I'd highly encourage you to tune in next week for the update because there will be a lot to go over. So, and after the deadline, we are going to be, like I said, we're going to be narrowing our focus, going for our second chamber hearings and advocacy for the things that are still alive. And we will also be drafting up a budget priority letter in the second half of the session to start circulating with the Ways and Means folks to let them know, hey, these are things that are priorities for the small farms in Oregon, and these are things that we think are vital to the viability of our community food systems in the next biennium and beyond. So we'll be drafting our budget letter and focusing on our second chamber hearings and advocacy after that April 9th deadline. All right. It's a little bit of a